My name is Sophia, and I'm 19 years old. I stand at 5 feet 7 inches, with a slender build that tips the scales at about 120 pounds. My hair is a cascade of natural blonde, falling in soft, inviting waves down my back. My eyes are a striking green, often described as emerald by those who dare to look into them. And my voice? Well, it's been called sexy more times than I can count. Low, sultry, a whisper that seems to curl around the room. Life was pretty normal until my mother decided to remarry. Enter Kane, my stepdad, a man who seemed to have been carved from the very essence of conflict. He's tall, with shoulders that seem to block out the light whenever he's angry, which is often. His hair is dark, contrasting sharply with my own, and his eyes, they're like storms, unpredictable and intense. From the moment Kane stepped into our home, we were at odds. We fought over the smallest things: the volume of the TV, the temperature of the house, even the way I chose to style my hair. Each argument was a clash of titans, leaving the air thick with tension. But somewhere along the way, these fights became something different to me. They weren't just conflicts. They were foreplay in the most forbidden sense. I began to anticipate our arguments, to crave them. The way his voice would rise, the way his eyes would narrow, it all sent shivers down my spine. I found myself dressing in ways that I knew would provoke him. Shorter skirts, tighter tops, anything to see that fire in his eyes. One particular evening, after a particularly fierce argument about my coming home late, we found ourselves alone in the kitchen, the remnants of dinner forgotten on the counter. The air was charged, almost crackling with our unresolved energy. "Kane," I started, my voice intentionally low, "I think I've grown to like this too much." He looked at me, confusion mingling with suspicion. "Sophia, what are you talking about?" I stepped closer, my heart racing. "I mean the fights. They make me feel alive. Maybe we should explore this. See where it leads." "Sophia, this is wrong," he countered, but his voice wavered, betraying his own turmoil. "Maybe," I whispered, closing the distance between us. "But what's wrong can feel so right." That night, under the dim light of the kitchen, with the scent of our neglected dinner hanging in the air, something shifted. I could see the battle within him, the right versus the thrill of the forbidden. But I was no longer just his stepdaughter. I was a woman challenging him to a dance he wasn't sure he should join. As we stood there, I confessed more than I ever intended. "You affect me, Kane. More than you know. I think about you when we fight, and I wonder, what if these battles were just a prelude?" He didn't move away. Instead, his hand found its way to my waist, the touch sending a jolt through me. "Sophia, we can't," he murmured, but his grip didn't loosen. "Can't we?" I challenged, my lips dangerously close to his. "Or won't we?" The line we were about to cross was thick with implications, but the pull was magnetic. Every harsh word, every heated glare had built up to this moment. I wanted to know what lay beyond the anger, beyond the propriety. I wanted to know what it felt like to be consumed by this fire we had stoked with our conflicts. As I looked into his storm-filled eyes, I knew there was no going back. We were on the edge of something wild, something that could either break us or bind us in ways neither of us had imagined. The tension, the anger, it had all been a dance leading to this point, and I was ready to see where the music would take us next. The next day, the house was unusually quiet. The tension from last night lingered like a thick fog, making the air heavy. I kept catching Kane's eyes, and each time there was an unspoken question between us. I decided to push the boundaries further. I wore a dress that was scandalously short, my hair up in a messy bun, showing off the length of my neck. When I came down for breakfast, Kane was already there. his eyes widening slightly before he forced them back to his coffee. "Good morning," I said, my voice dripping with the sweetness of honey, masking the storm beneath. "Morning," he grunted, his eyes flicking back to me, then away. Our breakfast was silent, but the air was loud with what had been said, and what hadn't. I could feel his gaze on me even when he wasn't looking, like a physical touch. Later, when my mother left for work, leaving us alone in the house, I decided it was time. I found him in his office, papers strewn across the desk, his focus on anything but me. "Kane," I said from the doorway, my tone softer now, more inviting. He looked up, and I could see the conflict in his eyes. "We need to talk about last night." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Sophia, there's nothing to talk about. It was a mistake." "Was it?" I stepped into the room, closing the door behind me with a gentle click. "Or was it the most honest moment we've had?" He stood, his presence filling the small space between us. "It's not right." What if right and wrong are just labels we use to keep ourselves from living? I moved closer, my heart pounding. I felt more alive last night than I have in years. His hand reached out, hesitating before it touched my cheek. His touch was electric. "Sophia ... I leaned into his hand, closing my eyes. "I want to feel that again, Kane. Don't you?" His breath was uneven, his resolve crumbling. "You're playing a dangerous game." "Maybe," I whispered, "but I think you want to play too." His lips found mine in a kiss that was all fire and pent-up desire. It was a kiss of surrender, of acceptance of the inevitable. The barriers broke, and with them, the pretense of decorum. We were no longer just stepdaughter and stepdad. We were two people caught in a storm of their own making, finally acknowledging the pull that had been there all along. After that kiss, everything changed, but on the surface, nothing did. We continued our daily routines, but beneath it all was a new, secret dance. A look here, a touch there, always when no one was watching. The tension was no longer just anger. It was anticipation, excitement, and a forbidden thrill. We found moments to be alone, stealing kisses in the shadows of our home, our hands exploring in silence. Each encounter was like adding fuel to a fire that neither of us could control. One afternoon, I found him in the garden, working on the lawn. I brought him a glass of water, my fingers brushing against his as I handed it over. Our eyes locked, and I could see the hunger in his. "Thank you," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Any time," I replied, letting my hand linger on his for just a moment longer than necessary. Later that day, while my mother was out, we found ourselves alone again. This time, in the living room, with the curtains drawn. I was reading a book, but my mind was elsewhere. Kane sat across from me, pretending to read a newspaper, but his eyes were on me. "Can't concentrate," I teased, setting my book aside. "Not when you're here," he admitted, his gaze intense. I stood, walked over to him, and sat on the arm of his chair. "Then maybe we should find something else to do." He pulled me down into his lap, his arms around me, our lips meeting in a kiss that was both tender and desperate. "This is madness," he whispered against my lips. "But it's our madness," I replied, my hands in his hair, pulling him closer. Our secret dance continued, each step more daring, more reckless. We were living on the edge of a cliff, knowing one misstep could send us tumbling, but the thrill of the fall was intoxicating. The thrill of secrecy began to wear on us. Every laugh, every stolen moment was tinged with the fear of being discovered. It wasn't just the thrill anymore, it was a game of cat and mouse where the stakes were high. One evening, during one of our rare family dinners, the tension was palpable. My mother was oblivious, chatting about her day, but Kane and I exchanged glances, each loaded with unspoken words. The air was thick with what we couldn't say. After dinner, as my mother retired early, claiming a headache, Kane and I were left alone, the silence between us loud. "We can't keep doing this," he said, his voice low, almost pained. "Why?" I challenged, standing up to face him. "Because it's wrong, or because you're scared?" "Both," he admitted, his eyes never leaving mine. I stepped closer, my hand on his chest, feeling his heartbeat. "Then let's be scared together. What we have, it's not just about the thrill. It's real." He took my hand, pressing it harder against him. "If we get caught, we won't," I whispered, pulling him down to kiss me, sealing our fate with a promise of secrecy. That night, we were more careful, more silent, but the passion was undiminished. We moved like shadows, our love clandestine, our touches like whispers in the dark. Each kiss, each caress, was a testament to our shared rebellion, our shared desire. But even as we danced on this edge, I knew one day the music would stop, and we'd have to face the light. Until then, we lived in the moment, in the danger, in the love that defied all logic and morals, embracing the edge of exposure with every beat of our hearts. Part 5. The climax of consequences. The inevitable came sooner than we expected. One evening, as we thought we were alone, my mother returned unexpectedly. Her plans changed at the last minute. The sound of the front door was like a thunderclap through our quiet, stolen world. Kane and I were in the living room, our guard down, lost in each other when the door opened. We sprang apart, but the damage was done. My mother stood there, her face a mask of confusion turning quickly into shock and then anger. "What is going on here?" Her voice was like ice, slicing through the tension. I felt Kane tense beside me, the air around us turning cold. "Emma," he started, his voice calm despite the storm in his eyes. It's not what it looks like." "Really?" she spat, her gaze flicking between us. "Because it looks like my husband and my daughter are about to do something very, very wrong." I felt sick, the weight of our actions crashing down. "Mom, please, let us explain." "Explain?" Her voice rose. "There's no explanation for this. Sophia, go to your room. Kane, we need to talk." I left, my heart pounding, feeling the world as I knew it crumble. From my room, I could hear the muffled sounds of their argument, my mother's cries of betrayal, Kane's attempts to calm her, to justify the unjustifiable. That night was long, filled with tears and silent prayers for forgiveness that I knew might never come. When morning came, my mother was gone, leaving a note that said she needed time away to think. Kane came to my room, his face weary. "Sophia, we've messed everything up." "I know," I whispered, my voice breaking. "But I don't regret it, Kane. I love you." He sat next to me, pulling me into a hug that felt like both comfort and condemnation. "I love you too, but love isn't supposed to destroy, Sophia. We need to figure out what comes next." The aftermath was a blur of days where we lived like outsiders in our own home, waiting for the other shoe to drop. We had reached the climax of our secret dance, and now we had to face the consequences of our choices, together, in the harsh light of day. In the wake of the confrontation, the house felt like a mausoleum, the air heavy with unresolved issues. Sophia and Kane were left to navigate the fallout, their once secret life now exposed. The days turned into weeks, with Emma still away, leaving Sophia and Kane in a limbo of guilt and longing. Sophia tried to focus on her studies, but every page she turned whispered of her mistakes. Kane, on the other hand, threw himself into work, but the office was just another cage for his restless heart. They avoided each other, their interactions brief and strained, each encounter a reminder of what they had lost. One evening, while Sophia was working on an essay in the living room, Kane returned home late, his eyes heavy with the weight of the day. He paused at the doorway, watching her, the silence between them speaking volumes. "We need to talk," he said finally, his voice rough. Sophia looked up, her heart skipping a beat. "About what?" "About us, about this mess we've made," he replied, sitting across from her. They talked, really talked for the first time since the incident. Cain confessed his fears, his guilt, and his undeniable love for Sophia. She shared her confusion, her fear of losing the only family she had left, but also her deep, unwavering affection for him. They decided to work on rebuilding trust, not just between them, but with Emma, if she would ever allow it. Months passed, and Emma returned, the atmosphere tense, but with a glimmer of hope. She had spent time with her sister, seeking advice and solace, coming back with a decision to try and mend their family, though she made it clear there were conditions. Cain and Sophia agreed to counseling, both individually and together with Emma. The sessions were raw, painful, and enlightening. They explored the roots of their actions, the dynamics that led to their secret affair, and how they could move forward. Emma was distant but willing to listen, her love for both Sophia and Cain battling with her hurt. During one session, Sophia broke down, apologizing not just for her actions, but for the pain she caused. "I never wanted to hurt you, Mom. I was lost, and I didn't know how to handle what I was feeling for Cain." Cain took responsibility too, his voice steady but full of regret. "I let my emotions cloud my judgment. I love you, Emma, and I love Sophia, but I was wrong to let it go where it did." Slowly, painfully, they began to rebuild. Sophia moved out to a small apartment near her college, giving space to both her relationship with Cain and the healing process with her mother. The distance was hard, but it was necessary for clarity and growth. With time, the family found a new normal. Sophia and Cain maintained a close but strictly familial relationship, their bond now one of mutual respect and care. Emma watched this transformation with cautious optimism, her trust slowly returning like a tide to the shore. Sophia focused on her studies, finding solace in writing. Her stories now reflecting her journey of self-discovery and the complexities of love in all its forms. She also started dating, exploring relationships with peers, her experiences with Cain teaching her the importance of boundaries and emotional maturity. Cain, on his part, dedicated himself to being a better husband to Emma, their relationship now deeper, built on honesty and the lessons learned from their collective pain. He also became more involved in Sophia's life as a mentor rather than a lover, supporting her dreams and offering guidance without overstepping. They all celebrated Sophia's graduation together, a symbol of closure and new beginnings. The ceremony was filled with laughter and pride, a stark contrast to the days of secrecy and sorrow. Sophia's speech touched on resilience, the power of love to heal and to hurt, and the beauty of second chances. Years later, Sophia published her first novel, a tale of forbidden love, redemption, and the enduring strength of family. The book was semi-autobiographical, but she had changed enough details to protect those she loved. At the launch, with Emma and Cain by her side, there was a palpable sense of pride and a silent acknowledgement of the journey they had all survived. After the event, they went out for dinner, just the three of them, a tradition they had started post-counseling. The conversation was light, filled with laughter, and for a moment, Sophia felt the weight of their past lift. As they parted ways that night, Cain pulled Sophia into a hug, a fatherly one, filled with genuine affection. "I'm proud of you, Sophia. You've grown into someone incredible." Sophia smiled, her heart light. "Thank you, Cain. I couldn't have done it without both of you." They watched her leave, hand in hand, Emma and Cain, their bond now unbreakable, forged in the fires of their past mistakes. They knew that love, in all its forms, had shaped them, taught them, and ultimately had saved them. Years had passed since Sophia's book release, and life had settled into a new rhythm. Sophia was now an established author, her books touching on themes of love, loss, and redemption. However, the shadows of the past occasionally loomed, especially when old acquaintances from their small town recognized the parallels in her stories. One day, an old high school friend of Sophia's, now a journalist, published an article hinting at the real-life inspirations behind Sophia's work. The article wasn't malicious, but sparked unwanted attention, stirring up old rumors and forcing Sophia, Kane, and Emma to face public scrutiny once more. The family held a meeting, discussing how to handle this. "We've been through worse," Emma said, her voice steady. "We stick together, we're honest, and we move forward." Sophia felt the sting of her past choices, but was resolute. "I'll do a public statement, clarifying that while my life has influenced my work, my family's privacy is sacred." Kane supported both, his protective instincts kicking in. "We'll get through this. We've learned from our past. We know how to protect what we've rebuilt." His public statement helped, but the incident made Sophia reflect on her personal relationships. She was in a long-term relationship with Tom, an editor who had helped her polish her novels. Their bond was strong, yet the article made her worry about the sustainability of her happiness, given her history. She decided to have an open conversation with Tom, sharing everything about her past with Kane. To her relief, Tom listened, his love unwavering. "Sophia, your past doesn't define you. What matters is who you are now, with me." This conversation not only solidified their relationship, but also taught Sophia the value of transparency. Meanwhile, Kane and Emma continued to strengthen their marriage, focusing on mutual interests and planning a trip abroad, something they had always wanted to do but postponed due to past tensions. The trip to Italy was a turning point for Kane and Emma. Walking through the historic streets of Florence, dining under the stars in Rome, they revisited their love story, unencumbered by past shadows. They laughed more, argued less, and found joy in simple moments, like watching the sunset over the Amalfi Coast. Back home, Sophia and Tom decided to move in together, a step towards a shared future. They chose a house that was close enough to Emma and Kane for weekend visits, but far enough to build their own life. The move was symbolic of Sophia stepping out of her past's long shadow, embracing a future with Tom that was hers alone. On Sophia's 30th birthday, they all gathered at Sophia and Tom's new home. Emma had helped with the decorations, and Kane was the unofficial grill master for the barbecue. It was a day of celebration, not just for Sophia's birthday, but for the life they had all rebuilt. During the party, Emma raised a toast, her eyes glistening with emotion. "To my daughter, who has shown us all what resilience looks like, and to our family, which has proven that love can endure any storm." As the night fell, Sophia looked around at her loved ones, feeling a profound sense of gratitude. She had once thought love was only about the thrill of the forbidden, but now she knew it was about the quiet, persistent strength of bonds that withstand time and trials. Years later, Sophia was an acclaimed author, her books translated into multiple languages. She and Tom had a daughter named after Emma, a joyful nod to the past and a hope for the future. Emma and Kane, now in their retirement, were frequent visitors, doting grandparents who taught their granddaughter about love, forgiveness, and the beauty of literature. One autumn evening, as they all sat in Sophia's garden, watching leaves fall, Kane looked at his family, his heart full. "We've lived through a story that could fill books." Sophia smiled, her hand in Tom's, her daughter playing nearby. "And it's a story of love, in all its messy, beautiful forms." Emma, her hand in Kane's, added, "It's about second chances, about choosing to love despite everything." Their story, once fraught with conflict and secrecy, had transformed into a legacy of love, resilience, and the unyielding power of family. They had all learned that while love can lead to the darkest of times, it also holds the key to redemption and the brightest of futures.